Hello, hello. Hi, Susana.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us here tonight. We're excited to be here live. This is our second live 2 out of 3. I can't say it's my first time ever anymore. We were here last week with Tessa Hicks Peterson. Really exciting. So my name is Azucena Ortiz, and I'm here with Jorge Rivera, and we're the founders and directors of the Healing and Justice Center. Super excited here today to be with, we're going to be speaking with Rey Aguilar from the Collaborative soon. But first, let me introduce you. I want to introduce our other team, the rest of Catherine and Carla. Catherine, do y'all want to share something before we?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was making sure who would go first. My name is Catherine. I am the project coordinator for HJC. A little bit about me. I was actually a volunteer when I met. I'm sorry. I was in college when I met HJC, Jorge and Azucena, and I became a volunteer for the organization. And once I graduated, I was able to move on to the team and be part of HJC, and I loved every minute of it, really. And I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. And yeah, that's it.
Yes, it's been amazing to have you on the team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm Carla Ortiz, and I'm the communications manager. And I've been with HJC since 2019, I believe, when HJC was still the People's Resource Center. And I've been so happy to be along for the ride. So nice to see everybody.
Yeah, well, Carla, Catherine, thank you so much for stopping by and introducing yourselves. I know you're going to be engaged in the chat, so we'll move you off the stream and we'll see you in the chat. Thank you so much.
See you there.
See ya.
All right, cool.
And so the purpose of these live streams is just to connect with community. It's part of our end year appeal. This work is so important to us, and we need funding to do it, right? And so we're asking people, community, to come in with us and help us be able to continue this work in 2025. And so part of our end of the year fundraising includes these live streams so that we can all be together and sharing what the work's about, why we do it, and bring in different people who are partners and contributors of our work. And yeah, so it's no longer Giving Tuesday. Today is just, let's build this community together. So if you are interested in becoming a monthly donor, sustaining our work, feel free to do that. You can do that at healingandjusticecenter.org/GT2024, or email us and we'll connect you. What else? Yeah. So today, basically, I'm going to be doing a little bit of grounding, so that I can stop speaking so fast, and ground my own nervous system. But just, it's been a long day for most of us. We want to ground ourselves in this moment. And then we'll bring in Rey, who's here with us, and we'll have a conversation about his work with Men Collaborative and, again, why healing. We're going to continue talking about why healing. And then after that, we'll open it up for any questions you all might have. Feel free to add them to the chat wherever you're joining us, Instagram or Facebook. Feel free to add them on the chat, and Catherine or Carla will share them with us so that we can answer them towards the end. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you so much, Azucena.
Bringing in Rey, or should I share a little bit about why he for us? I know I did that last time. Do you want
the grounding? You want to do the grounding?
Yes, grounding first, then why healing. All right, let's do the grounding. It's been a hard day. Like, it's been a hard day. My brain fog is like at all high today. So you'll see me, you'll get a glimpse of that today, y'all. So let's do some grounding. I really love doing the 5 breaths of reset because it just resets our nervous system and it gives different versions of what our body needs, right? So the five breaths of reset is a yawn, a really hard inhale, exhale, a soft sigh, and then long and slow, and then finally like full body, right? So those are the 5 breaths of reset. It's by Psicólogo Duran from Colombia. And so let's go ahead and start doing that. So I invite you to ground yourself, find yourself, get comfortable, and just inhale, a yawn. Releasing. Second one is hard inhale, hard exhale. Third one, soft sigh. Yawn really melts my shoulders. Fourth one, slow in, slow out. Last one, full body, opening up our arms, inhaling as we stretch arms out. Exhale as we bring our hands to our heart. And I just invite you to situate yourself, notice yourself in this present moment, release any to-dos or things that are coming in. I know maybe you're going from one place to the other or moving through your nightly routine. And so just go ahead and settle in wherever you're at, noticing your body, noticing if those breaths helped release any tension or stress, seeing what your body might need. All right. Thank you for that reminder, Jorge. I needed that grounding.
Sure, of course. That's what co-directors are for, to get your back, to have your back.
Yes.
Yeah. So you want to talk a little bit about healing and justice and why we're healing and justice?
Yes, why healing. Carla mentioned earlier, we were originally the People's Resource Center, and we talked about resource, both tangible, like, things like support with tenant rights and resources of that sort, right? But we also we were wanting to talk about inner resource, learning those skills that help us connect. And there's something about it, and I kept talking about healing justice and healing and social justice, and so somehow it morphed to healing and justice, right? And when we talk about healing in this way, we're talking about acknowledging how trauma and these experiences, right? Really disproportionately burden marginalized communities, right? And even healing work is largely done by us, by the marginalized communities, those that are affected by trauma, right? And so a healing practice recognizes that, right? And recognizes that it's not just about one person harming the other person, like one-on-one or in certain communities, but it's acknowledging like challenging systems that perpetuate harm and inequality, right? So in essence, practicing healing, practicing coming into awareness, practicing being in our bodies, reclaiming our bodies as a safe space, recognizing what we might be feeling and needing, doing these 5 breaths of reset is a revolutionary act, right? And it really fuels our ability to fight against inequities and oppression. I really do believe that healing ourselves gives us the foundation that we need for a more like just, equitable, and compassionate world, right? And so healing, I always talk about from individual to collective, but it's not just moving from, it's that journey, because it is an individual practice. It is something that you do have to like go inward and check with yourself and to know yourself and become aware of yourself. So then you can go ahead and be part of the collective in this way, right? So anyway, I don't know if you want to add anything about it.
Well, yeah, I know it's so difficult to talk about like healing because it's such a complex topic. Like what is trauma, and how do we define trauma, and what's considered trauma? And so just like learning about all the different forms of stress and the things that can be traumatic and how it impacts one person, it doesn't impact another person. There's so much understanding that needs to be done when we're talking about healing and justice, especially just healing. Because a lot of the things that we consider, I think, before I learned what I know now, it's like they were just like everyday stressors, like struggling to pay the bills or struggling to pay for rent, and just witnessing like violence in my community or houselessness. All of these things, they were just considered everyday things that somebody that is in a marginalized community or an impoverished community just experiences on a daily. And we don't come to realize that being exposed to those things day in and day out can really build on that stress and turn into trauma that affects our nervous system, that affects our health, that affects our mind, that affects our sense of self-worth. It affects the messages that we tell ourselves. It impacts so much of our lives, but because we're kind of born into that community, that we just take it as this is just life, and it doesn't have to be that way. I think that if we all learned healing practices and how to communicate and be in relationship with one another, we can change all of that so dramatically. But it takes all of that learning that we initially have to do in order to get there. And yeah, like you said, it starts with ourselves, and then we can try to extend it out into others and our family, our friends, community, and even in our work,
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think we're ready to bring in Ray, and we can continue this conversation with him, because
Yeah.
I think some of the work we're doing with Ray and that Ray is doing with non-collaborative really speaks to the nuance of what healing is, and the bigger picture of how healing happens and the ripple effects of it.
Sure. So we're going to bring on Ray, and Ray, I'm going to just read his bio here. Ray is like a program director at Men Collaborative. He's dedicated to expanding healing programs and empowering others through empathy, patience, and dignity. He's a former gang member who transformed his life during 28 years of incarceration. He's earned his business and social and behavioral science degree and certifications in substance use disorder counseling. He's led rehabilitative programs in addiction recovery, reentry support, victim offender dialogue facilitation, and his mission is to make amends, to help others heal, embodying the belief that healed people heal people, which is something that I totally agree with. So without further ado, let's bring on Ray and get started with the convo.
Hey, George, Azucena. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here and just be in collaboration with you guys. So again, it's an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here.
So Ray coordinates and manages or directs, I don't even know, I'm really bad with titles, the Day of Healing. And we are partners and facilitating. I come in to do specifically the embodied movement practices during the Day of Healing, and I support with co-facilitation some of the other pieces. of the Day of Healing. And Ray, do you want to share very briefly what the purpose of Day of Healing is, or do you want me to? What do you prefer?
No, I don't mind sharing. Day of Healing. It's an event that's just dedicated to supporting people's continued healing journey. Um, Meeting people where they're at. We like to encourage people. We invite people to show up as they're comfortable. And so, for the event, we what we do is we try to coordinate these days of healing all throughout the state of California, different prison system institutions, and so. Yeah, we have interactive activities, a lot of sharing, a lot of just being able to inspire, healing and what it looks like for different people, and everything that you guys discussed in the intro about what healing is, and we try to create this safe space for people to do that. It's we ask a lot in a short period of time, but because it's one event, it starts from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., but the time just flies by, and it's such an amazing experience, for the men and women on the inside, um, because they're heard, they're seen, and so yeah, I'm just so. I mean, I love the work. I love the piece that you do because it just gets people really connected with self, aligned with self, and also in connection with community, and that's huge. Healing is not. I mean, in some degree, it's individual, but it also happens in community, and so there's that component that's so important. And so I feel like Days of Healing is just that. It promotes the healing in community.
Yeah. And I think one important piece for me, Day of Healing, is it's meant to bring in, it's healing for survivors, right? Survivors of harm, both survivors that are currently incarcerated, survivors that have been previously incarcerated, and people that have never been incarcerated but have survived harm. And I love it because it really speaks to this systemic thing, right? Where like people that go and have these really harsh experiences where they cause harm to others have all experienced all kinds of systemic trauma, right? Like poverty, like just you name it, that they've had that experience. When we go in there and people share their stories, no one is in there. It's like, oh yeah, I had the happiest life ever, and I had ease and privilege, and I was treated like so well and raised. No one shares that story. That's definitely not the story, right? Everyone has been exposed to systemic trauma, and has really painful histories, and has all kinds of harm, right? And so I think it's important because oftentimes when people are incarcerated, they're just the fact that they caused harm is what's pointed out, right? So I love that the Day of Healing is really to acknowledge that, right? It speaks to such bigger context.
Right, for sure. I think for me, there's like, when it comes to like the system impacted population, which I'm, former lifer, incarcerated. I feel like there's two major barriers, right? One is the shame of being in prison for committing harm, and so feeling like I can't, identify as a survivor because I disqualified myself because I committed, a harm, not realizing that pain perpetuates pain, right? And that's one aspect, right? That we try to, demystify that. No, if you're a survivor, you're a survivor, and that's what we try to validate people's experience. And then on another level, I feel like sometimes it's just people are so desensitized, as George was describing communities and how they are, that even today I go and I facilitate workshops, and we get to talking about domestic violence, and I'll hear guys say something like, oh no, I've never experienced domestic violence, but then they get to talking about childhood history, and it baffles me. They're like, no, that is domestic violence. So like it's just so normalized, and they're desensitized to the trauma that they don't even realize that they're carrying it. Subconsciously, their behaviors are a reaction to it. So like that's a barrier as well. So when we start the conversation, I know for me personally speaking, I found my voice by hearing other people. until I started hearing people and I started to relate. And I'm like, well, that sounds like my story. Did I start to find my own voice for my trauma and pain?
That's why sharing the stories is so important, right? To even begin recognizing, because we've been so conditioned, right, to be strong in certain ways, or to believe that that's just normal, or that's, or even like, oh, that's a Latino thing, or that's a, only white people talk peacefully, only white people do the nonviolent thing, or you know what I
Or
mean?
therapy, right? Only they do therapy, right?
Well, yes, yeah, right. Um, and or that there's such a specific way of healing.
Yeah.
That therapy is the only way to heal, right? And there
Right.
are so many, like in the day of healing, we go through a process, right? We recognize people and acknowledge people in the room. We, go through a process of hearing stories so that we can begin recognizing what we have in common, right? So like telling stories, making it live. We have an opportunity to dance and be in our bodies and start finding safety in our bodies, which oftentimes when we have been harmed, our bodies are not always a place where we feel safe, right? So reclaiming that as a safe space, right? And then we get to just eat together and be in community together and share bread and break bread, and that itself is healing, right? When we do it with intention. And then we get to do some art and and be together through art and process through art. So there's so many, it's such a beautiful day because we go through this journey of all the different facets of like healing and ways that we can heal, and people connect to the different versions and what works for them, right? And so it kind of like reframes what healing could look like. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that comes up for me, Ray, in you talking about how healing happens in community, is one thing that I did learn from school was that the most influential way to change behavior is through role modeling, right? So if you're healing yourself, right, and doing whatever practices you're doing to try to heal, then your behaviors and your actions are going to role model for others what's possible and what they can achieve. So even as somebody that has been previously incarcerated and now doing this work, like you're role modeling for others that may be incarcerated or that might find themselves incarcerated, and how their lives can transform, right? Just by doing what you're doing and being in their presence, is like you're influencing them and showing them that there's other choices, there's other paths, there's other ways to be in community.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, George. One of the things that I often tell the guys is that, like, when I think about my family, it becomes a point of reference for me, but not in what to do, but in what not to do. And so, but I had to like learn, about, like, what, there is alternative ways to live, and so a lot of that, comes from me healing myself, and coming to a place of like forgiveness and letting go, not even if if the others deserve it or not. It was just freeing for me. And so, I often share with the guys that, having started a family, having a 4-year-old son, not wanting to perpetuate the harm, the generational trauma handed down, acknowledging it, but learning how to like break those cycles, is that I share with them that, I don't want to create for my family, a life that I never had. I just want to create for my family a life that they don't have to heal from. And so I have to heal in order to, be present. And for me, that means so many different things. It means being, comfortable with feeling, with feelings, being comfortable with processing those feelings, holding grief in a way that's not harmful. As you mentioned, I threw myself into my education because I realized that, like, I was ignorant about a lot of things, just how I grew up in my life. We didn't, we didn't really have a say. We weren't really validated in our emotions. And so substance abuse was commonplace, drinking and drugging. And so for me, it was like, well, those are the cycles I wanted to break, because I seen how they contributed. They weren't causative, but they contributed to, choices that I had made. So it was like, I want to learn about those things, how they play in. And so what I concluded is that, like, a lot of the things that I did, my behaviors and acting out, was secondary pain that I added to my primary pain. And it wasn't until I started to identify and be able to put my finger on the primary pain, what I was holding, that I begin to start, like, dealing with it, talking about it, getting comfortable, making peace with it. Did those secondary things start to resolve themselves? There were no longer escapes. There were no longer crutches. I no longer needed them to cope. So it really came down. So for me, that's just mind blowing, and I struggled to arrive at that understanding. So for me, I feel like that's part of my living amends, is to be able to, like, enter these spaces, create this safe space for others to be assisted on their own journey and come to their own realization. But it all comes down to being supportive, right? Supporting them in their journey, meeting them where they're at. And so I feel like just talking about my journey, my story, hopefully, encourages and inspires them to be more reflective on theirs. And so, begin to heal in their process. So absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, George. I appreciate that encouragement.
Absolutely.
I love that. In your work, um, what do you consider the intersections between healing and social justice as it relates to the work that you do in Men Collaborative?
Yeah, I thought about that question, right? I know that for me, on a personal level, right, to like, for people to feel supported in their journey, right? Inside, I've been fortunate to be at institutions. I did. I know you guys said 28, but I actually did 22 years, and during those years, I found myself in institutions that actually had a lot of programs, and then I was at an institution that didn't have no programs. I was fortunate to go to institutions that had good programs. People were, further along in their healing journey, so it was a good encouragement for me. Then I found myself in institutions that were underserved. Guys, were just they had the desire, but just clueless as to how that looked, and no outside sponsors, no outside guests coming in, and that's tough. That's tough, because so much is expected for them to arrive at a place of empathy and responsibility and accountability, and all they're sitting with is shame. So like that, they have to process that out, and so I feel like healing is so personal. But when it's happening and you see it happening, it starts to impact the community around it. And I've seen prison yards change culturally just by people starting to work on themselves. And then I've seen yards that are just, when there's nothing going on, that are just like, you could see it, like they haven't even begun their healing journey. And so yeah, it takes people to, like, step up and share their story and enter this space that's not so comfortable, but it has such tremendous ramifications when you do. Um, and like I said, the support itself, people they feel seen, they feel heard, and if we're going to change on the systemic level, right? I feel like when people heal personally and they find their voice, they start to understand their story, their narrative, and they feel empowered, then they can start educating their families, their communities, and start changing it on a systemic level. I mean, I talked to my friend. He him and I were in. We were in the same spaces, and he was telling me how he's educating a lot of the cadets who are coming out of the police academy about trauma and how it affects people and how people react. And so just the fact that, and he's in Santa Cruz, so the fact that they're doing that and trying to, like, broaden people's perspective, that's what it takes. Here he is, someone speaking from experience, to change the system and to change the culture of how people view these things. It's not just, oh, you're someone who committed harm. No, there's a story, there's a backstory. Is that backstory? And so I feel like when people are treated like people, then they behave differently. So yeah, for me, that's to answer your question. I hope I did.
Yeah. And just how, like you said, like when people are treated like people, just that itself is healing, right? When someone sees you and humanizes you, and you're not just a number on a docket, and you are just a person who's on a journey. And a lot of, I mean, to me, honestly, when I go into the prisons and I meet with these folk who are incarcerated, who are on their healing journey, and the level of accountability, I don't think I'd ever faced so much level of accountability like I had until here. And I started questioning my own connection to accountability, right? So it's beautiful to be challenged in that way, to see people who are like, yeah, like this is my story. And I found my voice and I could speak about my story, and I'm not gonna like go all the other way where I'm on my story, but also I take accountability how my story had an impact on someone else's story, right? But I love what you said. I think you narrated really well, of this idea of when we tell our story, we find our voice, and then we can educate others and advocate for others and change systems, right? And you got to see it on a yard. When we change we change our family, we change our community, and then we can create change, right?
Right.
So just
Absolutely.
really appreciating that.
Yeah, for me, I learned that like empathy for itself is a learned behavior, and if we grew up in trauma infested neighborhoods, always exposed to a lot of those things, we go into like defensive mode, like survival mode. We're just very protective, disconnected. We can't feel, and so I remember myself, there was instances, without getting into detail, is I really sat there, being accountable, trying to change my life, but emotionally disconnected, and asking my higher power, God, like why is that the case, because I'm trying to feel here, I really, but I realized that I spent such a good portion of my life hyper vigilant, in survival mode, that I learned how to disconnect, especially being exposed to domestic violence. That was a safe space for me, and so relearning empathy, relearning selflessness, relearning that emotions are okay, they're not bad, they're amoral, they're bad when I'm expressing them in harmful ways, and so just relearning that allowed me to be comfortable with who I was, to start to self-accept who I was, who I am, and so not judge myself for feelings, and basic things like that, validating people's emotions and my own emotions. For me, those are milestones when it comes to this process, and it's continue. It's interesting because I often share this story. My grandma, she raised me for a good portion of my life, and she's very dear. I lost her when I was incarcerated, and I remember being incarcerated. I grabbed her pictures, folded up her letters, and just put them away in my little legal folder. 10 years pass by, I get married, I get out, and my wife's like, hey, why don't we do an ofrenda, Dia de los Muertos, and kind of celebrate our loved ones, and we'll tell our son about the people who have passed. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's do that. So I brought out my grandma's picture, and my uncles and other people that I've lost over the years. And so she's like, okay, you go first. And so I couldn't get no word out. I just broke down emotionally. I was like, like I lost my breath, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And she's like, don't be sorry, don't be sorry. But one thing I took away from that experience, right, is that she created a safe space for me to finally cry, right? Finally to cry. And this is 10 years later. I didn't realize my body was carrying that. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like even though when you think you're healing, like there's still work to be done, but just open to that process. Like you talk about feeling safe in your body. Like, man, I understand that 100%, because I felt that, and I felt when I wasn't safe, and, things like that. So, little experiences that still happen. That's why I enjoy the days of healing and other things like it, because I always learn something about myself. It's my continued journey on healing, and I know that if I'm going to show up in life, if I'm going to show up for my family and my kids, I need to continue to work on myself. And so, it's an endless process. I'm excited about the work, excited about what you guys are doing. It's needed. I wish there was more of it and it was happening, more often, because our communities that we come from are in desperate need of it, and they don't even realize it. They really don't.
Yeah, well, we're numb to it. That's how these systemic cycles can continue, right? These
Yeah.
forms of oppression can continue because we're conditioned to ignore it and not realize it and just kind of be stuck in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
I really appreciate you sharing that story because it's so powerful, right? It's so powerful how it really talks about what you're saying, like why we call this a practice. I really want to change our the way we talk about healing. I mean, like healing sometimes gets a bad rap. Like it's very like soft and ooh and feely, or like very painful and hard and like ugh, right? And yes, it can be that, and it's hard when we have to face some hard stuff. And sometimes it does feel like it's all peace and love, right? But the reality is that it's very small practices daily, like awareness, conscious, like learning how to relate with each other, relearning those skills that we lost because we never, like people didn't help us develop our empathy, or it wasn't a safe place for us to be vulnerable and empathetic and kind, right?
Right.
And so having to reconnect to those, reconnect to our sense of safety, even if we are in a world where sometimes it doesn't feel so safe, where things are not always so safe, right? Like how do we find safety within us? So it is a practice, and so changing that narrative of like only because you can't remember what happened to you, or only because it wasn't that bad, doesn't mean that we don't need a practice to continue help us connect to that our humanity, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think going back to just like the work that you all do at Med and Collaborative and inside the institutions, it's like for those folks, it seems like taking the steps on the healing journey is such a courageous act, right? Because running away and like hiding from feelings and hiding from pain and desensitizing ourselves is like that almost seems easier than facing it. And so when going into the prisons and seeing these folks that are supposed to be so tough and hard, right, and not show any emotions, really tune in to what they're feeling and their experiences and being responsible and accountable, that stuff is really, really hard when you come from the places that they probably come from, because that is not what you're supposed to be, because that shows like signs of weakness, right? It's the opposite. And so when they actually like say, no, I'm gonna like heal this, I'm gonna face this, I'm gonna deal with this, that seems to be the most courageous thing any one of those folks can do, right? Even more courageous than
I mean, in their setting, in the setting of prison, definitely more courage. But the reality is that it's the most courageous thing any one of us do.
yeah.
And the truth is that one of us is well, a lot of us who have had trauma is only like a line away from have made a choice that could have ended up with us there, right? Like I know for me in my life, there's definitely been some really fine lines, and over pain, right? Over trauma that I've experienced. So, just it does take a lot of courage to step into healing, right? And even more courage when you're in a setting that doesn't really promote it, that doesn't really allow space for it. So just really appreciating that comment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you pointing that out, George, because like there's so many things like prison culture that serves as a barrier to this work, and one of those things is that men in prison do not want to feel vulnerable because, like you said, that's a sign of weakness, and so but that's what it's going to take, for a person to undergo, or start that journey is by getting vulnerable, and so yeah, I believe it's nothing short of courageous. And the work that people do, and so it's a journey of self-discovery. I mean, there's so much that I like. I guess never really understood that played a part in my behavior until I started to be reflective and thinking about like, man, how this played into my life, and so it's awesome to see guys in there who are more open to the idea of healing, who are more receptive, who are signing up for these programs. Just this past weekend, I'm sure Susana, you could attest to. We heard things like, I've never been treated so, kindly. I never experienced stuff like this. Like that's creating a safe space for them to start to, be vulnerable, to start shedding away the, like, those masks, if you will, that have been protecting them all these years. And so, yeah, it is courageous, and I commend them and then everyone else who, who just wants better, right? I mean, it improves the quality of life. I mean, this has nothing to do with socioeconomic status. This is internal riches, right? That's how I see it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ray. I'm so happy that I was able to get to come in. I got invited as a guest as a survivor, and because I'm at heart, I I supported some facilitation, and then I came in and started doing the embodied movement, and have been doing this with men for the last about year and a half now, since September 2023. So I'm really excited, and it really motivated me to want to offer more. So I don't know if I've shared with you, Ray, we're gonna start doing parenting classes. We're calling them Parenting Beyond Walls. We're gonna be doing some parenting classes so that, because when parents go in there, they don't stop being parents. They don't stop being moms. They don't stop being dads. They don't stop being brothers, sisters, or being in relationship with family, right? And so we're going to be offering some parenting classes at only for right now at CIW. We are looking for additional funding to expand it to CIM as well, so that dads could also participate, so that they learn or relearn or reconnect to some of these tools, or deepen some practices that helps them connect with their children, so that they can break generational cycles of harm and trauma, right? So I'm really excited. We're going to be starting that in January.
Congratulations to you guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I couldn't think of someone better to do it. So yes, thank you for your guys' willingness, and that too. I mean, so many people fear going into prison, and here you guys going into prison. That, to me, that's the trenches. I showed up when someone from the outside showed up. I was lost, clueless. I just knew that I wanted to change, didn't know how. But when someone like yourself, like you, George, showed up and was like, "Hey, look, this is what we're doing," I'm like, "Sign me up, help me," because I knew I was in a state of desperation. So I just appreciate what you guys are doing. That's the reason why I continue to go back, because I know there's a lot of folks who are, who want it, but like I said, there's that underserved institution, that no one is attending to. They just don't want to deal with it, or for whatever reason, right? Whatever reason. But these are spaces we definitely need to, step into and encourage, help others. So thank you for that, for sure.
Thank you so much, Ray. Appreciate your time. I know we have another meeting in a few minutes, so I want to honor the time and honor your time, and just thank you so much for coming on here and sharing with the community what we're doing. I think it's important for us to share, like, bring awareness to this work. So thank you so much. I'll see you in another 15 minutes or so. Everyone out there in the virtual world, thank you so much for joining us. We invite you to keep supporting this work. This is part of our end of the year campaign to fundraise for 2025. We have so much in store for 2025. We're starting our parenting program on Saturdays for the community of El Monte and surrounding communities. Anyone who wants to and willing to do the drive out there is welcome. We have 25 spots, so feel free to register and sign up for those. We're also starting the Parenting Beyond Walls at CFW and other programming as well. So please become a monthly supporter if you're able to. Any donation is welcome. It really sustains our work. And just appreciating you all for taking the time to be here with us tonight.
Yeah, I want to say thanks, Ray. Just commend you, and thank you for being you, right? Thank you for doing what you do, right? You've been on that journey, and now you're role modeling and you're shining your light and you're showing folks that it can be done. And the fact that you're out there and you're doing that work is really transforming lives. I'm in like awe and in admiration of what you and Men Collaborative do. So everybody, if y'all are out there, like be sure to follow the Men Collaborative. They're on Instagram and on LinkedIn. And Ray is also on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with Ray, you can find him on LinkedIn. If it's okay with you, Ray, we can share your LinkedIn page. And again, as Azucena said, is like, you know, we're a small nonprofit trying to do this work, and every little bit helps, even if it's $5 a month, you know, which is the cost of a coffee. So buy us a coffee every month, you know. And we'll continue to do the work with fabulous folks like Ray and the Men Collaborative. So again, thank you, Ray. It was a pleasure having you.
Yes, thank you both. I appreciate it, and look forward to getting on again. So yes, please keep me in
What
mind.
happened to your base?
Definitely.
Take care, y'all.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.